They, oh, okay. I didn't know anything about my father's family. He died when I was 16, and I knew nothing. I just knew the only piece of information I knew was that my family died in the Holocaust, other than my mother and father. But I didn't know the names of my grandparents. I didn't know if he had siblings, what siblings, how many siblings. And so I did a search about 5 years ago with the help of help of a lot of people along the way, but mostly with the help of the Cologne Archives and Documentation Center, which ironically is in the building that housed the Nazi government in Cologne between 35 and 45. They've turned it into museum and into offices upstairs. And I discovered that my grandmother died in Theresienstadt, and my father's sister and her husband died in Auschwitz. My father was no longer living at home at the time that he was leaving. He'd lived in Holland for a year, and then, so everyone says to me, why didn't he take his mother with him? Well, she was more living closer and nearer and more involved with his sister, who was still living in Cologne. And I'm guessing, I don't know this for a fact, but they were amongst the Germans that didn't believe that this was really going to happen. You know, in 36 and 37 and 38, the good German people are going to come to their rescue. This is not how Germans act. They didn't believe it, and they didn't get out when they could. And then it was too late for them. So I discovered all of this through my search about 5 years ago. And I laid Stolpersteine, the memorial stones, for my grandmother and my aunt in Cologne.
Okay, thank you. And Zippy, I love your sunglasses. So why don't you give us a little bit of background on yourself? And hi, Judy, how are you?
I'm good. I'm in my car.
Are you traveling to or from Los Angeles?
I am traveling from the Jewish Federation offices to my home.
Ah, very good. Okay. Well, some other people may be joining us late as well. So go ahead, Zippy. Why don't you introduce yourself? We have a new member, Irene, and Carol are here. So we're just doing a little bit of a quick background on yourself and how you connect to the Shoah. And you have to unmute yourself, Zippy, please.
Zippy,
Here we are.
All right.
Oh, ich bin den ganzen verschäubert. Just a minute, okay.
Klachte Gläser, scheine Gläser.
Schönen Dank, schönen Dank. Are we going to say this in Yiddish or in English?
In English.
Oh, okay.
Otherwise, I don't understand you.
Oh, okay. Never mind. Mach nicht aus. Anyway, it's okay. I'm going to leave the glasses on then. I'm in Mission Valley. I'm here in San Diego today to see my daughter Sarah, who just moved into a new house, and my daughter Rachel is with me as well. So we're in Mission Valley, and it just turned out that we're here ready to have lunch. So I'm sorry, I'm in such a noisy, crazy place. I'm in the foyer of the restaurant, but by hook or by crook, I wasn't going to miss this. So here I am.
Wie sind die Tochter?
Aina is too. Sarah, say hello.
Hi.
Hello, Sarah.
That's Sarah. And then Rachel, Ruchele, I don't know what happened to her. I think she's in the car talking to somebody on the phone, as usual.
Well, listen, that's
all right, tell Irene about who you are and what your background is.
Okay, I'm gonna cut it short because it's a long story. But I was born in Quito, Ecuador. My parents, after the Holocaust, came to Ecuador because my uncle had gotten out before the war happened. But after this, between the First World War and the Second World War, and he went to Ecuador and established himself. And when my parents came out, they went to Milano, where they had a displaced person camp, and they were able to communicate with my uncle, and he invited them there. He was by then very successful and established them a beautiful house and put them in business. They had a nice little market, but they weren't able to stay because I had breathing problems at that high altitude. And I was born in Ecuador, but at the age of 2.5, I came to the States with my parents, and they started again. And they started a little market, and my Aunt Sarah was here. She was the one who sponsored us. So she was here, and there was a beautiful Jewish community. And my father had wanted to be a cantor all his life, and his father died when he was 11 years old. So in our new community in Los Angeles, he had several cantors that he had befriended, and a rabbi who from Vizhnitz. He was from Vizhnitz, which became a part of Romania, and they made their own little shul, which I also did in Ecuador. They started the first Jewish shul, and it's still there. It's still in operation. And so they started a little shul in the house, and they had services, and they had little gatherings, and created a sense of community. And that was the story. But my father came from a poor family, Hasidic, and they spoke Yiddish at home, and both of my parents spoke Yiddish at home. And my mother came from not a real well-to-do, but a comfortable family. And my grandfather was a logger and in Austria. And so my mother, because she went to finishing school, she was in Bucharest living with her aunt. And so the rest of them were taken by the Nazis and gassed. They were killed right away, but my mother survived. And she said that my father always said that I would survive, and she did. And my mother always said, never forget who you are. And that sustained her. She knew how to do embroidery and knitting and things like that she learned in the finishing school. And she was able to save a family of 5.
Okay, Zippy, thanks. How about
I
Renee?
can go on. You just asked
No,
a question.
I know. I got to keep it moving.
Okay.
Renee, go ahead quickly.
Yes, quick. 1, 2, 3. I was born in the United States. My parents were born in Germany. My grandparents were born, one in Germany, one in South Africa. My great-grandparents, all German. Like Yvonne's, they were good Germans. They couldn't possibly accept the fact that they were being rushed out. My mother started fleeing in 1933. She was fleeing for a long time, going from place to place to place to go to school with her younger brother. My father, who was a lot older, they were from Bavaria, towns in Bavaria. They didn't know each other until they met at a Jewish refugee dance in Cleveland, Ohio. I have laid Stolperstein for my mother, grandparents, and uncles. And the community where my mother was from, the town, is very actively engaged in establishing a second memorial and is starting a new education program where those of us who are children of survivors are pairing up with students in Coburg, which is the town, and giving our family stories. My mother was able to get out because my grandmother, her mother, was from South Africa and was, before they slammed the doors, was the last one out under the quota system because she was considered a British subject. My father, it's not quite clear because nobody supported him, but somebody must have supported him somewhere. I think it was actually a stranger. The story goes that a stranger.
Renee, if I can ask you to share quickly the Ritchie boys.
Okay, so my father was one of the Ritchie boys, which was, okay, you're shaking your head so that you know.
We saw the show. Mhm.
Okay. And so my father was recruited to be one of them, and
Wonderful.
he captured the number 2 SS man.
Oh, great.
Renee, what is your father's name? I did see the movie, and but I don't know which one was your father. What was his name?
Herbert Kraus, Kraus.
Okay, thank you.
Somewhere
Okay.
I have a shot from the movie where his name is. I took a still well, I mean, what is it? Pause the movie and took a screenshot of it. So,
Okay, and Judy, can you talk while you're driving? Judy, are you with us still? Oh, maybe she's in the house.
Maybe she's,
How about Freddie? Can you talk while you're cooking?
Yes, my claim to fame is I introduced Jeff and lovely wife Myra to the group, and he absolutely exploded this a giant group all over the world. And my second claim to fame is a welcome to Irene and Carol. My very good friend Brenda told me that there's 2 members at her synagogue who are second gen. I said, I don't know them. They haven't come to anything. So to backtrack a little, like Saul, I was born in Germany in 47, came to the United States in 49. And like Saul's uncle, my parents got a chicken farm in New Jersey. And then my dad opened up a feed mill to supply the farmers with feed. And here I am in California. Prior to that was in Tucson, Arizona. Prior to that, Chicago. And prior to that, New Jersey. So that's my story. Oh, my parents were both from Poland, from 2 different areas of Poland. And my dad, okay.
And I'm forever grateful for Freddie to introducing us to this group. It has made a huge difference in my life and as well as Myra's. So Judy, I know you tried to get on and then I jumped over you. So I'm going to give you a few. I'm
going to pass. I can just say I came from the memorial at the Federation, and I'm lucky enough to say that my parents came to San Diego from Germany in 1949. And they were at this, they helped develop this memorial that's now beautifully standing today. And there's so much more, but I think everybody tells pieces of my story. So thank you for asking.
All right, Ann Gorski, are you with us?
I am.
Are you? I don't know if you can go on screen.
I'm with you. I'm with you.
All right, there you go.
Hi, Jim.
Perfect. Hi.
All right. So I was born in Germany in 48, and my parents were both Polish. My father was, I think, one of the very, very last people to escape the Warsaw Ghetto. And he went into hiding in Warsaw, and that's a long story. And my mother was also from Poland and lived in Rzeszów, a middle-sized town, and which I visited. And she ended up with fake papers and lived in Warsaw. So that's a very long story also. But my parents told me everything, and any questions I had, they would tell me. They were sole survivors of their families. So like you, most of you, I grew up without grandparents and the whole thing. So we were sent to Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and I ended up out here. But anyway, it's not a thrilling background, but it's our story. And I'm blown away by how well my parents were able to cope and do life. And they had a lot of joy in their lives. And I was they were optimists, and I was given that gift. And that life is beautiful and good, even though I know the reality of what humans are capable of. But it's always a part of me, no matter what I do. And I wish it wasn't.
Okay, very good. So I think that gives you a really good sense of our organization and our group. We have 125 paying members in the San Diego generations of the show. 50 of them are also part of the movie club. We don't see them all the time, but we do have an event every month. And my background is a bit different than everyone else's. I didn't want anything to do with the show. My mom was a survivor of Auschwitz. She lost her mother and her baby sister. She survived with 2 of her older sisters, and her father, who she didn't know was living until liberation. So he was taken over to the men's camp, and they didn't know what happened to her. Eventually they were transferred. The girls, the three sisters were transferred to Ravensbrück in Germany to make a Siemens ammunition factory. I don't know any of this from my parents because they were absolutely silent. I use this term, their silence was deafening. And I was traumatized by that silence for my whole life. And only when I met Freddie at the JCC with my wife, Myra, we've been married 35 years. Freddie was knitting. My wife can talk to the phone book, and they got it on to talking. And all of a sudden, Freddie slipped in how if one of us was a second gen, and I was, and immediately Freddie said we started talking, and now Freddie's a part of our family, just like Judy and some of the other members, and Saul and some of the other members in this group. So I'm forever grateful. This group has done amazing things for me mentally and emotionally to allow me to get my angst out of my bones. I have never, prior to 2019, watched a Holocaust film. I never read a book. I never went to a Shoah memorial. I wanted nothing to do with the Holocaust. And now, as you can see, I've kind of flipped the switch on all of this stuff to the point where I'm now running two major groups that represent and to honor my parents of the Holocaust. So both my parents are no longer living. So today we're going to start talking about two films that I recommended that we watch. They are completely different. And I'm going to do something completely different in today's session that I've never done before. So you'll give me some leeway if I'm not exactly great at it. We're going to start off with Generations Apart. And that's a film that I thought was really, really intriguing when I watched it. And so again, Sam asked me just this week if I would spend some time talking to you guys why I choose these films. And I feel a little bit weird about that because I don't really want to bring my parents' stories into these film choices, but they are very personal to me. And I have now seen over 500 Holocaust films, and that sounds really nuts, but I'm using this Holocaust film to try to retrace my parents and my father and my mother, who had different pathways in the Shoah, to understand what they went through. And my primary research goes beyond the films. And I have met the artists who create the films, and I generate programming and bring the directors or the artists or the producers into programs like this to tell us why they made the films. And they also helped me understand my path. And the members here also helped me. And I also run, just for your benefit, Irene, and everyone else knows this, I run a Jewish group, the Jewish Culture and Holocaust Remembrance group on Facebook, which has over 2,300 members now around the world. And so I produce programming like this for that group as well. So we're going to first talk about Generations Apart. So I'm going to do something to start with. So I'm going to share my screen. So just give me a second. And hopefully you can see this screen and you'll start to hear me. Can you hear it?
No.
I've known about the concentration camps as long as I know. But I can honestly say I never used to think about it too much.
At first you just hear it, it's just a story, and it's not real. But then one day you realize that, hey, this really happened, and it was really my mother.
Do you remember your parents well?
Yes. I love them. I love them both.
They told us to take out the clothes, and nobody wanted to go away.
Can you raise the volume, Jeff?
Yes.
It's so horrible that I can't really imagine.
As a matter of fact, I didn't even know that everybody's mother wasn't in a Holocaust.
As we walked into the camp, immediately they took him to the gas chamber. When my children cried because they got hurt or because they didn't get what they wanted, I didn't hear or see my children. I saw them with them. guilty that I had put a load on you because of my experiences.
Well, you did. You did. You put a load on me.
It's obvious that it has something to do with who I am. I don't know to what extent it does.
I think I owe all my children an apology.
It's the guilt and your imagination, your fantasy about what might have happened and what might have happened to you. Totally different Holocaust happened. What you're talking about is the Holocaust of the mind.
I don't know if it owes me an apology.
Okay, that's pretty powerful. So let me remind everyone, if you get cut off, you can just dial back in. I'll admit you. We have technical issues always with computers and internet. But in order for me to understand some question and answers that I want to ask you to do, if you'll see on the bottom of your toolbar on Zoom, there is a reaction button. Oh, sorry, I got to shut this off. Sorry. Get back here. So there's a reaction button. And if you see that, I'm going to raise my hand, right? My hand or hand raise or thumbs up. It just gives me a chance to understand that you want to add something to the conversation. And when we find our way, we will be able to understand this. And all of us will be able to see each other's hands. So I have a couple of questions to start this off. I don't think anyone's parents in this group are still living. Is that correct? Raise your hand if there is anybody, parents still living. I guess not. Zippy, put your hand down so we know whether you are or you aren't. Okay, good. How many of you parents spoke openly about their Holocaust experiences? Maybe you can raise your hand. Okay, we got 2, we got 3. Okay. And how many of you have been affected by that silence in some way, shape, or form?
Well, do you mean by the silence, or do you mean
by the whole concept of being a second generation and survivor? Has it impacted your life in some way? Okay. Now this is very interesting, and it speaks to something that I'm taking on as a project. We recently had in my other group a program called Generational Survivor Trauma, and over 70 people joined that discussion and started to talk about their survivor trauma. I'll speak personally to mine. For years, I didn't know why I had certain things happening to me. I had nightmares whenever been an entrepreneur my whole life, building businesses, selling businesses. I sold my last business in 2000, tech business in 2016. But all along my life, when I had a downstroke, I had nightmares that I was being interrogated by the Nazis. Hot light, boom. I don't know where those ever came from. I never watched a movie. My parents never talked about it. And I had this reoccurring nightmare in a cycle throughout my life. And that has traumatized me tremendously. And it has caused me to go into really bad places. So that's how I've been affected. And what was interesting, and Saul joined, and I think Yvonne, you were on that. Were you there with us during that program? The one that,
yes.
Yes. So it was very interesting to watch. And I think Renee, you were there as well. It was very interesting to listen to the stories of 70 people who are all connected through the Holocaust. And it was breakthrough for me to be able to put something like that together. I want to be happy to tell you that Dr. Schrager and I are doing another one around Yom HaShoah. So we're really excited about that as well. It'll be different, but it'll be interesting. So I want to kind of just open this up. And I chose this movie because of what it did to me. It was the first movie that I had someone who was talking about the situations that I was experiencing, and I really only identified them when Freddie introduced me to this group. If Myra was here right now, she would tell you that I didn't want to go to the first event at all because I was scared to death of it. And I was so appreciative that I went because I realized that when I started talking to people, they had the same issues that I did. I didn't know that parents didn't talk. I thought everyone talked except my parents didn't talk. And it was really interesting. And so I saw in these real life stories, the stories that I was affected with. And I want to now open it to you, and please raise your hand so I can call on you, and we have plenty of time. So we have ample time to talk here. Don't feel rushed, but I'd be really interested how this movie hit you personally. And whether, we can look at it from a standpoint of just watching the movie and not involving ourselves in the movie. Or for me, I did the opposite. I actually involved myself in the movie and kept on thinking. I've seen this movie now 6 times, just trying to figure out what I should know. So who's going to be first to raise their hand and let me know? Go ahead, Irene.
I just have one thing. I watched it yesterday, so it would be kind of fresh in my mind. I don't know the names of the people. I can't remember most of them.
It doesn't make a difference.
The mother and the daughter that were talking. I could identify with that because the daughter was saying to the mother, she didn't tell her much and she was cold, So, I mean, I can identify with that because my father was warmer than my mother. My mother never could get over what happened in Germany. My father could go forward, my mother couldn't, but I could identify with the two of them about, their feelings and stuff too.
So it's very unusual because we have 2 sisters sitting next to each other. And did you watch it, Carol?
Carol did not.
I did not.
Not yet. No, she
Oh,
didn't.
okay. Well, it'd be interesting for you to both watch it because I've been recommending that people watch it as a family.
Right.
And to see how one sibling plays off against the other. Go ahead.
Since I'm the oldest, it affected me the most. And as I got older, I was more and more how something like this could happen. So I started watching Steven Spielberg's Shoah, the documentaries on these people, which my parents did also. And I started watching hundreds of them the last few years at night too. And I haven't really got nightmares, but I'm more and more cannot get over the whole thing. And it's more as I get older than when I was younger.
Now, I can tell you that I should really have said this. After watching 500 movies, I no longer have any nightmares. I haven't had, and I've sort of lifted. I feel lighter as a person. Strange, but it's, how I feel. So Renee, you wanted to go next? I've done, yep.
Yeah, this is obviously not from watching the movie, but from the shared experiences that we all have from one perspective or another. Even though it was talked about, there was still some element that was hidden. There were pieces, when I say what you're describing, Jeff, as your sort of emotional construct, for lack of a better term, we can all touch on that, even in spite of differences in our experiences. And so there was an element of shame or some sense of hiding that shame does to us. When we feel some sort of shame, we hide. And we don't admit to any of it. And I remember a therapist telling me, related to another situation of trauma, the best way to deal with it is to talk about it. So there you are, master at it, Jeff. I applaud you, because that is the way through. There's no way around it. No way around it. And I carried with me all kinds of messages that though I think I'm healed from it. I don't feel anything hanging on here. And I went through a ritual to do some final clearing. Because I didn't want to bring any of it with me. So I did a ceremony before I moved from Washington across the country. I just said, no, it's clear. And if you talk with my younger brothers, we each have, totally different experiences. And my father was very active in taking my brothers to all the places in Germany that touched the family.
So let me ask you, you said you did a clearing. So what was the impetus for you to join a second generation group? Because you would think you didn't need it.
I don't have to join things simply because I need it. It may be out of, I'm new to San Diego.
Okay.
There are ways to make connections. I might not suffer, but that isn't a qualification that I would look at. That would be something.
Okay. No, and we're not, and for you, Irene, to know, and Carol, we're not a therapy group.
No,
So we wind up talking about our lives, and the stories that we tell help us.
and I remain,
individually.
as Jeff knows, I remain highly sensitive. That's simply my nervous system. So watching the movies is not something that I tend to really do.
It's not pleasurable, I understand. And Anne, go ahead, next.
I saw the movie a long time ago, so I'm not real fresh on it. But for me, my parents, if I asked questions, they would answer me. I wish that I could have asked my dad more questions about his mother and sisters and brother, but I was too afraid to open the wounds. And I didn't get a chance when I was older to ask, but I'm sorry I didn't ask the questions about their personalities and, what their lives were like. And I just was too afraid of opening up the wound. And the same with my mom. And I was very careful not to do that, but they did talk to me. But there was a line where it was too personal. And I would imagine just too heartbreaking to ask certain questions. So I wish I could have gone a little further.
Okay, Yvonne, did you want to say something?
Yeah. Regarding the movie, I was struck by the difference between the two brothers. How one thought, the older one, who probably had a little more experience, said it's in the past, it doesn't affect who I am today. And the younger brother, if he thought it affected everything. And I've got to say one thing that the older brother said, when he asked, when did you first become aware of the Holocaust? And he thought about it. I don't remember what he said, whether he gave an age or not, but I remember very specifically, even though my parents weren't themselves in the camps, but can you imagine, here I was born in March 1942. My grandmother was deported July 1942 to Theresienstadt, and she died in Theresienstadt or on the train for all I know, but it's listed that she died in Theresienstadt 3 weeks later after her I've got her deportation papers and dates, and 3 weeks later, she's in the register of Theresienstadt that she was dead. We have no way of knowing exactly how. So I always knew, maybe about osmosis. I didn't know anything about that. That's all new information in the last 5 years. But when I was 6 years old, I already knew that there was such a thing as the Holocaust. And someone asked me, what is my first memory? That was my first memory, knowing at 6 years old. And the reason I remember the age so very specifically, it was 1948, and the nationalist government first came to power in South Africa in 1948. Before that was a British United Party. And many Afrikaners from the Nationalist Party even though South Africa was a colony and we served with the British forces officially, there were many who, brown shirts, black shirts, whatever, that joined the Nazis. And so when they came to power, I just had this memory of my parents' phone ringing all the time, all these conversations with their friends. And everybody was saying, the Nazis are coming back. The Nazis are coming to power. And all I knew at that time at 6 years old was that the Nazis had killed my family. So for me, that was a very traumatic time. As it turned out, the Afrikaners weren't bad for the Jews. I mean, they were bad for other reasons, but they weren't bad for the Jews in South Africa. So it didn't affect my life. But the other thing I wanted to say, the most thing that affected me was having no grandparents, no aunts, uncles, cousins, no one. It was my parents, my brother, and me. That was it, the extent of my family. So that was the biggest effect on my life.
Saul, did you want to say something, Saul? Did you put up a heart?
Yeah, I felt a lot of similarity with the brothers, and I have a brother who's 12 years younger than I am. So obviously we both have different perspectives. I'm the oldest. I was born in Germany, and my experience was always sheltered by my mom, who really didn't want to, embolden it. It's almost like one of the mothers with the daughter. She said, "I don't want to burden you with this," and I think that was something that my mother felt, that she didn't want to burden me with it, and my father couldn't talk about it because it was so difficult for him, of the tragedy for every one of his brothers and sisters and everything that he lost, including his brother that I mentioned earlier with the lightning in 1956. So my mother was really someone who sheltered me, and I didn't live amongst mostly Jewish people. Most of the Holocaust survivors, like from my generation, who came from Germany to the United States, they were kind of in the same communities. We lived in a totally Italian neighborhood. And for me, it was kind of relieving. When you talk about family, I was kind of adopted by the Italian family that lived next door. I was adopted by the mafia. I was like in a different kind of mode, but I always knew that there was something different. And the thing that really inspired me was, I thought my parents' existence was so different than the other Jewish survivors, that I had the time and the ability to sit my parents down and over 20 years ago and record everything that I could possibly get out of them. And eventually it became a book, and now it's on Amazon. And, I'm very fortunate that Jeffrey has been very helpful in marketing my book. Thank you, Jeffrey. And it's been very successful. And I'm appreciative of the fact that we are all together. We can all share our experiences, because there's something very special about us. It's something that no other people can really imagine. I mean, what they went through was abominable. I mean, it was just beyond description. It was inhumane, and we know that, and we were able to overcome that, and that's only because of our parents. Thank God.
Okay, anybody else want to, Zippy, do you want to add something? Unmute yourself, Zip.
Yeah. I'm just very moved by all of the things that different people have said. And I believe that my whole life has been overshadowed by the Holocaust. And one thing, even that happened today, my son was, teasing me that I always go to the dark side. whatever I'm talking about, I go right away to the dark side. That we were talking about, just something. I thought, well, what if there's somebody, this is a dangerous neighborhood. What if somebody attacked? What if something happened? He said, why do you always go to the dark side? And I believe it's because my mother was always so fearful, always fearful and overprotective. And I think that I carried that on like she did.
Okay, thanks. Tova, it's nice to see you. I don't know if you're on mute, so I can unmute you if you want me to.
Jeffrey, I just wanted to say I must go right now. I'm with my family and I've been keeping them waiting, but I wanted to be here so badly, and it's just conflicted, but I wasn't going to give up. Take care and be well. And I love all of you.
Zippy, and don't lose those glasses.
Love you too, Zippy.
Love you too.
Thank you.
You got the best glasses, man.
Thank you so much. Take care. Bye-bye.
Okay, and I see that Judy's coming on. Probably made her way home.
So we had this. Am I on? Can I talk?
You can. We're getting some feedback, but go ahead.
Okay, so I'm in the car. They had a rededication today. It was and I don't know all the facts. My memory is horrible. I think the lady's name was Lichtman. There was this beautiful sculpture, and I'll put pictures up on Facebook. That was put up in 1971 at the old JCC. And they had a rededication of that sculpture. They put it now at the Federation building there. And so they had like a whole thing at 12 o'clock. So that's where I was, and then the luncheon. So I have two survivors in my car. But what I did want to say is I couldn't, for some reason, Amazon wouldn't allow me to see the one movie. I'm going to try another time. But just from my story, I believe you're asking just about Holocaust. My parents did not speak about it at all. The only thing was my mom had her numbers on her wrists. I knew that. And I would say I knew more about Holocaust from their behavior than from them telling me stories. The oddities that they did at home and various things, but only in the last few years have I delved into it more, with, being part of the Butterfly Project and the Generation and this movie club and the book club. And I'm in the third year member of the Shoah Committee. So I'm just like a sponge. Whatever I see or hear, I think, oh, maybe this is what my mom went through or my dad went through, but never a direct account from them. So they never spoke. They just wanted us to always be happy and live a normal life.
Okay, Judy, do you want to add anything?
Oh, I'm so honored to hear everybody's stories. And Jeff, I don't know if you've ever read Helen Epstein's Children of the Holocaust. I mean, it's a must read, I think. Don't you, Renee? I see her shaking her head. I read that book when I was probably
a long time ago. We read it.
When I was 30.
Yeah.
Maybe. Yeah. I remember reading it.
Yep.
And putting it down and going, oh my God, I'm looking in a mirror. There are other people like this, like me, who think these things, who have these thoughts about their family, who are so much like me. And I remember bawling my head off and just having a seminal moment. And I thought the movie, The Generations After, was done well, but I think her book, that it's an old book, but I think it was less judgmental and more of a research-oriented type of book where she had really interviewed a lot of people. She wasn't just talking about herself. Anyway, I really recommend that book. It's old, but it's good. And, I think for me personally, I didn't, until I was about 30 years old or so, maybe after reading that book, I didn't realize I didn't have I didn't really, not that I didn't know I missed having grandparents or family. And I think that I owe that credit to my parents for, offering me a very, very happy childhood, very carefree, very go-lucky. Listen, I grew up in San Diego. Who wasn't luckier than that in the whole world? I mean, going to the beach every day. I also my parents did not want to be part of a greater Holocaust group. We moved to La Mesa when I was 6 years old. There were no Jews there. There were only 3 Jews in my high school. And my parents were working very hard to integrate into America. Yes, they had survivor friends, but they were not in a community of Jews or survivors. Anyway, was set today, Tova. It was lovely, and to see so many friends of my parents. Thank God, love them, still alive. Harry's in the car. People who I, somewhat grew up with. It was very, very heartwarming and neat to know that we're moving ahead with the future to educate and get rid of those, excuse my language, those fucking people in Texas who are so stupid.
No politics, please, Judy, please.
Not politics, that's fact. So
Okay.
there you go.
All right, Tova, maybe you can point the camera at Harry and we can all see him. I don't want you to get in an accident, but maybe you can.
Especially with them in the car. No, she can't. She's muted.
All right, you're muted, Tova, so I can't hear you. I don't want you to get in an accident.
Yeah.
No, I just dropped them off. So I just didn't want to miss the meeting. So at least I can, it was extremely moving and very special that they've got that. And then they also had this group, the Tzofim. It's a youth group, and they meet every Sunday. I think from 3rd grade to 12th grade at the Jewish Academy. And so it was very good to see this multi-generational, presentation of people, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, maybe, and to just pass the torch and never to forget and educate the future generations. It is a very moving day today. It's
Very
beautiful.
nice, very nice. So let me ask you another group of questions. When was the first time that you knew, and Yvonne, you mentioned 6 years old, that you knew something like the Holocaust existed in your family? And was there a pivotal trigger that you can share? Obviously, if you don't feel like it, you're welcome not to share, but I throw that out to the group. And if anybody wants to raise their hand, I'll start. I didn't really understand that there was anything different about my parents, other than my mother removed her tattoo on her left arm and she had a very heavy scar. I never really understood it, but I knew it was there. My defining moment was when I was bar mitzvah age. I was required to go to the synagogue for lessons on Saturdays, and I always sat to the left of my mom. And I had to do this for maybe 6 weeks or something like that. And on the run up right before my bar mitzvah, I touched my mom's scar, and she just gave me the mom dagger eyes that only a mom can do. And she froze me against the wall practically. And I never, ever discussed anything else with my mother after that moment.
Wow.
So I'll throw it out to all of you. Is there any triggers? When did you know about the Holocaust? Anybody want to contribute anything?
Well,
Okay.
go ahead, Ann.
I don't know how old I was. I might have been, I don't know, 5. but I remember looking at some old photographs. My parents had photographs in a box of us in Europe. And just anyway, and in there somehow there was a picture of naked bodies in a pile, like in a camp. And I was just staring at it, and I thought, I was horrified. And I thought, what is this? And why is this in our pile of pictures? And I went back to it a few times and looked. And again, I never said anything to my parents because I knew they wouldn't be happy if they knew that I had looked at it. But I remember that being a pretty disturbing thing.
Okay, Saul?
Yeah, I think it's different for all of us, depending on, like Jeffrey, you were born in the United States, and it probably was a different time where your parents had already somehow somewhat recovered from the traumatic experience. Being that I was born in Germany right after the war, and I think my parents were much closer to PTSD, and so I think I was aware of it, although they tried to make me not aware of it, but it was impossible not to be aware of it, because you talk about the tattoos. Both my mother had 2 sets of tattoos. My father had a set of tattoos. They lived and spoke with a definitive Jewish accent amongst people that didn't speak that way. So, I knew that they were different, and I knew that something had traumatized them more than the other people. So, I knew this also at the age of 5 or 6. And, it just like, but my mother tried to always cover it up. And then again, my brother was far more interested, and he would nudge my mother all the time. There's a 12-year difference between us. So my mother was much more relaxed talking about it at that time. And he speaks Yiddish better than I do. And I'm running a Yiddish class here with half the ability that he has. So, it's interesting that, there's differences in our age groups.
And your brother is older? Are you the oldest, or your brother's younger than you?
I'm the oldest. My brother's the youngest.
Okay.
He's 12 years younger than I am. So anyway, the difference is, closer maybe to your experience, because I'm sure when my brother talked to my mother about it, she was far more relaxed, and he really, it doesn't have as traumatic an effect, I think, on him as it does on me. Anyway, but everybody's different. Everybody absorbs it differently.
And Renee, unmute yourself, please.
So I think I also was 5 or 6. And it was when I really started school, because my parents didn't sound like anybody else's parents with their accents.
No, welcome to the club.
Right? Here I am. And
why not?
Yes, so I asked. I mean, and my grandmother, I think I've shared here, amazing that she got a different grandmother, my dad's grandmother. My dad's mom. She never spoke English. And I stupidly, what did I know? I told them to stop speaking English because they were in the United States. And they stupidly listened. Now I really would be a much better global citizen if I spoke German. And part of it was, yeah, they spoke different, but they laughed. I always remember telling them, but you laugh with an accent too. And that sticks with me forever. About laughing with an accent. How do you laugh with an accent, honestly? Think about
I don't know. You want to give us an example?
I'm not a good imitator because I'm not so good in music, so I can pick stuff out. So it was in the school age, when I first started.
Okay, does anyone else want to contribute, or I'll move on to the next question? I
Well,
have for you?
yeah, I would, my side, nothing. I would say probably more in South Africa, in the Jewish day schools, could do an ulpan to Israel in 10th grade from I think September to December. And so a group of us from our school went. We stayed in Steyboker, and one of the tours was the Yad Vashem. And I think there was another Holocaust memorial. And I think that was the reality. And I think I cried my eyes out, but I came home and they never spoke about it. So it was just a deathly silence about it.
Okay. All right. I'm going to ask the final question and then we'll move on to the next film.
Judy had something to offer.
Oh, so sorry, Judy, you're in the corner there. I didn't see
I
you.
just wanted to add that I think, you were talking about, trauma, and I swear to God, I remember so little from my childhood. I remember some things, but I think the trauma that my mother had a really bad temper and a lot of things like that. But I don't remember much about school. And I think, and I certainly don't remember when I knew about the Holocaust. I think that affected me, that it shut me down, that I just have very little memory of my childhood.
Okay, so I'm going to give you a little sneak peek of the program that we're planning with Dr. Schrager, and I'm going to have some fun with you guys. And I'm going to give you the topic. You have to give me 2 answers, each one of you, so you have to think hard. And Freddie, you haven't been contributing, so you're going to have to come back into the equation, get out of the kitchen and talk for 2 minutes. So messages. What were a message that your mom gave you and your father gave you that was unique to your parents? These messages probably are not unique when we hear them all, and then someone's going to say, oh, that's what my dad said, or my father. So my messages were this. My father always said, why don't you freaking turn off the lights? We don't own stock in the PP&L company. My mom would always say, you are a stick. If you don't eat, I'm going to be sick. So now I'm going to ask everyone to give me their mom's and their father's messages that you believe are unique to yourself. Saul, you're up.
Okay. My dad, we lived in Brooklyn, right in the heart of where the mafia, if anybody, I've mentioned this before, but for those that are listening now, if you've ever seen the movie Goodfellas, my father's candy store was right next door to the 19th hole, which was the bar where, this is a true story, Joe Pesci was a mobster who wound up killing a made man. That bar was the bar that was right next door to my father's candy store. Anyway, when I was a kid and I lived amongst a lot of people that were gangsters, and my father always said to me, these people, I want you to understand this very clearly. He said, these people don't know how to walk straight on the sidewalk. They have to go into the gutter. They don't know any other way. I want you to understand that you're a Jew and you're going to walk straight and you're going to be honest. Okay, that was my dad. My mother, everything is going to be taken care of by grandma. Grandma is looking down upon you and she's benching you and she's making good care of you. And you have nothing to worry about. Everything is going to be fine. Alles setzt sich ausheilen, which means everything will heal and you'll be fine. Okay.
Very, very good, Saul. Yvonne, oh, I see you're
No,
deep.
I
You're in
cannot.
deep in
I
thought.
cannot.
I'm coming back to you. Anne. Where's Anne?
Okay, Ann, okay. My mother basically said, you know, what's in our family stays in our family. There are some secrets, or you don't go, I didn't grow up around Jewish people. So don't go telling everyone you're Jewish. In other words, just, you know, keep certain things to yourself. Don't out yourself. And I guess I sort of remember my father saying at times that animals were better than humans at times. Yeah.
Interesting. Renee.
So my mom's was, if you should ever marry anyone who is not Jewish, you are finishing Hitler's work.
Okay.
A corollary, take care of yourself, whatever you do, learn something so you never have to depend on anyone else.
That's, you know, my wife's father said exactly the same thing. None of my girls are ever going to rely on a man. They're going to make something, and he forced them into making a career of themselves so they could be independent. So that's kind of interesting. All right, Irene, and then.
Dad, no, I didn't.
Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry.
You didn't talk about a father.
Right.
I'm sorry. My hands are in the air.
So my dad's was, Krauses never quit. So you just keep on. Somehow you figure out a way. I mean, I'm interpreting the undertone, but the message, and I tell myself that today, every single day. I started it with the pandemic. I said, because that sort of at the beginning traumatized me. And I brought back, okay, my dad said Krauses never quit. So here we go. So.
Okay, very good. And Irene and Carol?
Yeah, we were just talking. I mean, my father used to say when five of us sat at the dinner table, if we didn't finish or we didn't like the food, he said, you know, people were starving during the war and he was in China and there wasn't a lot to eat and this and that, to always finish your plate. So that stayed with us forever, pretty much, right? We're pretty good at finishing our plate and not wasting food. My father was quite frugal, obviously, because very frugal. We didn't have anything. And my mother liked to spend. So that was the opposite of those two. But we can't think of a message from my mother.
Well, you know, it's very interesting is I spent 4 years living with my mom towards the end of her life, and she lived to be 93 and mentally all there. But one thing she told me that in my whole life I had never heard was that in the mid 1930s, she used to hear her parents and their friends joking about Hitler, making tons of jokes and stuff. And her message to me was like, given what was doing after 2015 here, like never do that. Take them all seriously. You know, don't make jokes and stuff. She said, you know, with Hitler with the mustache and everything, they used to just joke about him. And that was very interesting to me. My mother opened up a lot in the last couple of years of her life. I mean, she did over years. What was interesting is that her mother never talked about anything with the war. Her father would tell her things that then she got to know. But my grandmother, till she died, would never say anything, never talk about it, which was
well,
really
my mother
sad.
had PTSD.
I realized in the last 4 years that both my parents had PTSD, that growing up, I went to a Hebrew school at the temple and realized that other kids that were Jewish, whose parents weren't Holocaust survivors, had very different lives than we did. Right. We had a lot of anxiety. There was a lot of fighting, you know, there was a lot of like trauma going on. And for these other people, when I went to their homes, it wasn't like that at all. So very different growing up
That's an
with it.
interesting point. How about Tova? And then I'm going to get to Freddie, then I'm going to get to Judy, and then I'm coming back to you, Yvonne. So be ready.
I cannot think of a thing, so don't bother.
Well, I'll just say two quick things about my mom. She always wanted the joke of the day. She always said, tell me a joke. She always wanted to find ways to laugh. And the other thing is, don't trust anybody. And in South Africa, we said, you don't trust anybody. And my father, not necessarily actually saying anything, but from example, I would say his message would be to work hard, take care of your family, and support the Rabbonim. You have to support Jewish organizations. So he was very big with charity and to give to the yeshiva bochers in Israel if these rabbis would come. So he donated. It says you have to support Jewish organizations, but he never ever said anything to us. It was more by his behavior.
Freddie, are you there?
So I'm here. So I must have blocked everything out because I'm not remembering any exact messages, but the example they said, my dad, like Tova's dad, always was very giving to the community. They, when they moved to this little farm in New Jersey, the survivors built a synagogue there. And one of the things he said, well, the example was nothing is too difficult. And that's a mantra I've had all my life, that it's not difficult. And my mom was always worried that, like yours, Jeff, that I wasn't eating enough. She's too da. So I had to eat. And my dad would say at the dinner table, now is the time to eat, not to talk. We always had lots of food, but it was the time to eat. So,
yep. Okay, thanks, Freddie. Judy.
So many similarities to all of you. So much. I'm with Freddie. I don't really, and Tova, you so elegantly said that it wasn't really about what my parents said as much as what they did. I really didn't know my dad very much. He worked 24/7. I'm so sad when I hear all of you that you can remember things. I do remember one thing, a couple of things about my dad. One was that if he really liked somebody on TV, like Walter Cronkite or a really good baseball, he said, I think they're Jewish. Everybody really great that he liked on TV. I mean, I think he thought Fernando Valenzuela on the Dodgers was Jewish. I swear to God. I remember that he was a very, very hard worker. And from my mother, some things, I do remember one thing about her. She stood up for justice. She wrote letters to her congressmen, to senators. She lived in California, Alan Cranston. She was always, if she saw an injustice, she wrote to them. She always was a doer, and she encouraged my brother and I to always be upstanders and never ignore, violence, injustice. And she was that way to the very end, really admirable. And, she was until she had her stroke, she was always pointing out the bright side of life. And then I think her PTSD really kicked in and she became so negative. I think in her older years, all of that came flooding back. So I wish I could say more.
Okay.
I admire all of you.
All right. So I'm going to leave you off the hook, Yvonne. So, but I lied. There is one more question I have for you. Set you up. So now that you've disclosed what your parents have said to you, the obvious question is, what do you say to your children?
I'll start and just say, I believe in what my parents, I believe I don't tell my kids anything. I let them by my example and the kinds of things I'm involved with and where I give my money. And you can't tell your kids anything, so it doesn't matter. But I hope I've set the legacy by how I live my life.
Freddie?
The same as Judy. It's what they see. And I have grown grandchildren, and I feel the same. It's what they see.
Okay, Tova?
Yeah, I kind of agree how it's very difficult to tell the millennials and our children and grandchildren. And whenever it's anything Holocaust, it's always like, oh, my mom will be so interested. Oh, it's, she's always talking about the Holocaust. It's more me, nothing. But I'm trying to do the best as I can by example. So they see that I'm involved in what I'm involved with to do. And they saw I started working on my family history. And they're definitely aware of it, but it's at this stage, they're so busy raising their own children. And this is the last thing on their mind. So it's kind of like, in a way, like a downer. So I try and get them to come to the memorials. I don't know, you've only been here a few years, but hopefully they're going to have a live commemoration at the JCC next year. So my kids have gone to that a few times, and then when the grandkids will be a bit older. And I've done things with the butterfly, but I don't focus too much on it right now. But definitely, I've got all my tools and all my information ready when their time is. But they definitely proud Jews, and they're aware of it. And my granddaughter has done some projects with the Holocaust with school. So it's definitely a live wire that it's going to continue in the family, but it'll be done in a certain way. But right now they're just living life.
Irene and Carol?
We have fur babies.
We do not have children. We have our little doggies.
We have our fur babies.
So
Those are our kids.
Don't they talk to you? Don't you talk to them?
Oh, yeah.
How about, don't you talk to them like your parents did?
Yeah.
And you know what's great about them? They don't talk back.
They don't talk back.
Exactly.
But my other sister, I have another younger sister that lives in Hawaii, and she has 2 boys. And I don't think they have any idea about any of this. She didn't marry Jewish, and no bar mitzvahs. My mother had a fit. So, we're the end of it pretty much,
Yes.
which is very sad. Very, very sad.
Okay, Yvonne?
Well, I only have one daughter, and the message I seem to give is a message of be careful all the time, security, not safe. When she drives too fast. I'm always telling her off, and she's ready to drop me out of the car because she's so. My grandkids are now in their teens, but when they were little, and my grandson had his little electric car, the neighborhood kids would all jump on it, and I could just see them hitting a stone and somebody cracking their head open. And I insisted that they wear their bicycle helmets if they're going to do that. So I guess maybe in a way I had a fear from my childhood that I don't remember. And I'm passing that on to them. And she would say, this is the message. And about my mother, she never knew my father because he died when I was 16, but she did know my mother. And she said, she's always trying to tell us what to do. So that would be the message that would, maybe I'm doing the same. Maybe the one thing that she hated about my mother was that she tried to tell her what to do, and I'm doing the same thing. And? So maybe I'm not giving such a good message.
Well, I'm very close. I have 3 nephews that I'm very close to. They don't live here. But the important thing is that I want them to, or that I try to tell them, enjoy life and try to get the most out of it. Be a good person. And I've made very sure that they know their family background and where they come from, and that should be passed on.
Thanks, Ann. Saul?
You know, my mother did that for me. My mother was probably the most affectionate and well-loved grandmother that I've ever experienced in my life. My two daughters adored her, and she was a great example. And there was nothing that I could have said any differently than what she did to enhance their educational development, their personalities, their acceptance of all people. You know, she just endeared herself to most people, and so she did the job for me. I really. Besides, two daughters, what do you think they're going to listen to me?
Well, then get Ellen and ask Ellen that question. I want to hear from Ellen on the side over there.
Well, she went out shopping, so Ellen, believe me, Ellen will tell you that she feuded with them because that's the normal relationship between mother and daughter.
Well, I'll just say that my mom had a postdoctorate degree in Jewish guilt, and I'm carrying it on. So I have no qualms about giving my son, who's his only child. I have no question about talking to him about anything. He never answers me, but it doesn't stop me from asking the questions.
Yeah, well, keep asking.
Can I just add something? Is I think how the message is actually going through to the next generations as messages is maybe the whole Black Lives Matter, and they have this bullying. So they do have this as part of their curriculum in the school, depending on what age level it is. And that's how the Holocaust stuff kind of story sneaks in to educating the general public here in San Diego. It could be different in others. So I think through that, that's how really the message is getting across, you know, with the bullying and they're very conscious. The schools emphasize where my grandkids go to, mindfulness and being respectful to other religions and other people. So through that philosophy, that's where the whole Holocaust story comes in to educate these kids today.
So how many people enjoyed this movie? Raise your hands.
It was interesting. It was certainly interesting.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So we're going to switch gears. This is a big gear switch. And we're going to go over to the next movie. And again, I'm going to work on sharing my screen. And hold on a minute.
Okay.
Let me this is going to take some time here. So, okay. And I'm going to play several during the next conversations. I don't want to get into a discussion. This is a brutal movie. There's nothing that we're going to say that we're happy to watch this movie. But I want to take this conversation completely different than where I think you may think I'll take it. So just give me some leeway to be able to make my argument. And I'm going to start here.
Jeff, if we have something to still add to the last one.
Sure, we'll come back to it.
Well, I may not be here, so okay.
All right, well, why don't you type it in on the chat?
Ich schäme mich heute, dass ich diesem Orden beigetreten bin und stolz war, in der Leibstandarte zu gehen und stolz war, dieses Zeichen zu tragen. Und der Führer, der Held, hat sich Pfeile im Bunker verkrochen und hat sich erschossen und der Verantwortung entzogen. Und dieser Adolf und seine Clique haben uns Unglück gebracht. die haben dazu geführt, dass wir unsere Heimat verloren haben. Und die Ehre habe ich verloren. Und was? Die Ehre. Das war noch damals auch voll Ehre und Stolz. Und was wir die Ehre beibehalten hätten. Und schämen dich jetzt dafür, dass Sie damals die Ehre hatten, für Ihr Vaterland zu stehen? Das verstehe ich nicht. Ich schäme dich dafür, dass es. Ich schäme mich für die Verbrechen, die begangen wurden. Fürs Vaterland einzustellen, war doch ganz was anderes. Alle sagen ja, weißt du, wenn wir auf die Kamera angucken, sagen die ja, dann überleg doch mal. Die Mehrheit hat geklatscht, als wir London und Coventry in Schutt und Asche gelegt haben. Haben gewusst, dass Frauen und Kinder dabei gehen. Das ist die Folge, weil wir uns haben verführen lassen. Natürlich ist das die Folge. Hier in Deutschland die Konzentrationslager, dass Warschau kaputt gemacht wurde. Überall, wo man heute hinkam, muss man sich schämen. Wenn Sie charakterschwache Menschen, die jetzt hier in den Raum sitzen, denken sich jetzt, scheiße, ich bin Deutscher, was mache ich denn jetzt? Genau so was, das machen Sie gerade. Sie verurteilen gerade Menschen, obwohl Sie selber sagen, wir können nichts dafür. Aber gerade wenn ein charakterschwacher Mensch ist, der denkt sich, nein, ich bin Deutscher, ich muss mich schämen, mein Leben lang. Warum zeigst du dich offen dein Gesicht in die Kamera? Warum bist du so feige? Mach deine, guck in die Kamera und sag deine Meinung. Das tust du nicht. Mann, sonst wäre ich wieder ein Straftäter und wäre von irgendwelchen Rechtspflichten verfolgt. Ich sage, du bist einer von denen. Warum verkleidest du dich? Weil ich sonst wieder ein Straftäter bin oder sonst was. Sicherlich. Ansonsten ist das in ihren Augen genauso Straftäter wie bei anderen Volkskameraden damals. Und dann müsste ich ja Angst haben, dass ich von Nazis jetzt was ist das denn für ein Blödsinn? Müsste ich auch haben. Wenn ich so offen haben, wenn sie im U-Bahnhof langlaufen, nicht mehr von unten Albaner abgestochen werden. Also, davon muss die Angst haben, aber doch nicht von den eigenen Volksbürgern. Also ich denke mir auf an, die müssen wir ja ganz ruhig antworten. Nein, aber das sind wir doch genauso nicht. Aber das ist... Ich gehörte einer Mörderorganisation an. Was war es denn sonst anders? Was war das anders? Unschuldige Frauen. Man kann doch der Meinung sein, dass das falsch ist, was wir machen. Das kann ganz falsch sein. Aber man kann doch nicht unschuldige Frauen, weil sie Juden waren oder weil sie Zigeuner waren oder weil sie schwach körperlich gebaut waren, krank waren, haben sie abgespritzt in Euthanasie. Ich kenne bei uns Franz Lepkis, der war so, mit dem haben wir mal unser Spaß gemacht als Junge. Und eines Tages war der verschwunden und stellte sich aus, dass ein Landwehr an der Warte eine Spritze gekriegt hat, weg war. Wir haben nämlich gesagt, uns wurde erklärt, unwertes Leben ist zu vernichten. Unwertes Leben. Wir haben das perfekt gemacht durch Planung, die hier in diese Hause in der Wannsee-Konferenz ausgearbeitet wurde an so einem Tisch, wie wir hier sitzen. In gemütlicher Runde bei Kaffee haben sie beschlossen, wie die Juden, Frauen und Kinder umgebracht wurden. Mit dieser scheußlichen Methode, da kann ich doch nicht stolz drauf sein. Da schäme ich mich heute. Und es ist doch nicht selbstverständlich, dass ein Jude mit einem SS-Mann wie mir spricht, der davon überzeugt war, dass es richtig war, was der Adolf gemacht hat. Überlegt doch mal, was das bedeutet. Ich habe mit 23 alten deutschen Juden, die Deutsche waren, die Väter waren zum Teil im Krieg, hat mir eine alte Jüdin über 80 Jahre erzählt. Mein Vater war im Weltkrieg, im ersten, hat Auszeichnung gehabt. Der wollte nicht glauben, dass die Nazis ihn umbringen. Und der hat sich geweigert, aus Deutschland zu flüchten. Das muss man sich alles mal vorstellen, was da passiert ist. Und das, also ich kann es nicht verkraften. Aber ich finde es wichtig, mit jungen Menschen wie euch zu sprechen und ich habe nur die Bitte, lasst euch nicht verblenden.
Okay. So I'm going to, before you say anything, I just want to absorb that. I'm sure that you have, those of you who watch this, it was very painful to watch this film. But I'm curious for you to put yourself in the viewpoint of the director. Luke Holland, Christian-born director. He only found out that when he was a teenager, that his mother's was Jewish and his mother's family was wiped out in the Holocaust. So why do you think this film was made? Hands up. Judy.
Well, I think it was made because of what's, I know you don't want me to say this, but that there are Holocaust deniers and you have to make a record of these things. I know you all know what Dwight Eisenhower said when he toured the camps. Take as many pictures as you can. Take notes of everything, because in 50 years, people are going to say this never happened. And I felt this guy must have, you know, he had a vision and a value about him that he needed to do this.
I agree. Yep.
Anybody else? So what are some of the thoughts as you were watching this film? I have other clips to show you, but before I do.
Yeah, I found that scene, that particular scene, the most disturbing because of the young Germans there who obviously are still pro-Nazi. And that's probably the reason he was addressing that particular group. Also, the other older Nazi who still had all the memorabilia and
yeah, we'll get to that. I'll get to that scene. It's on my
just
list.
about this, the fact that they wouldn't accept what this person who experienced it and was himself a Nazi, it was awful pushback against anything that he tried to tell them. And it was very disturbing.
Why do you think
each one of them walked out there believing what they came in there with the same ideas?
Anybody want else add anything?
I just think it's the younger generation of Germans are definitely conflicted. So I think there's so many aspects to that because, you know, now with social media, you can be bullied, you can be killed, you can be followed. So they walking this tightrope. I don't know necessarily if they were pro-Nazi or not, but just by saying you from Germany, then maybe people from other countries might automatically think you that. So I think it's the dilemma that some of these youth are going through. And by having someone, a German person, validating everything, which is very important, and it's hard to deal with this younger generation. What do they do about it? So it is a conflict of a situation for them.
Yeah, you know, they never said, the producer never said why this particular group of young Germans was chosen. Who were they? Were they college students? Were they people who'd committed some Nazi crime or something? We don't know who they were.
Okay,
and that would have helped to.
I'll give you an answer in a second. Well, hold on a minute. Let me find it for a second. Most frightening scene in the film, this is written by another author who reviewed the film, comes from the aging SS man but from younger members of the German society. Former SS officer Hans Werk, who was the gentleman who we just saw, pays a visit to the villa in Wannsee. Now, does all of you know what happened in Wannsee? That's where the final solution was carried out by Eichmann and his gang. And that beautiful castle was where that event took place. There he meets German teens flirting with xenophobic right-wing politics. So these were selected by Holland because of their inclination and right-wing.
So they're very much like
Okay.
our white supremacy
Yes.
Nazi groups here.
Yes. So I'm going to put something in chat for you to think about, which is part of this program for me. And I just got to locate it again. And I would like to understand your thought about it. Here it goes. Read it and give me some of your thoughts right off the top of your head.
It's not showing.
I'll see.
We have to get out to the screen.
Chat on, press on the chat, press on the chat button. It'll come up on the side. I don't know what device you're on, but
Yeah, there's a little chat button in your toolbar on the bottom, and you see me place it. Have you seen it? Have you seen it?
Yeah.
yes.
Yes.
Is
Okay.
Holocaust education the antidote to anti-Semitism?
Go ahead, Renee. Unmute yourself, please. Unmute. Yep.
I thought I did, but okay. I would love to say yes. And I can't. I don't really think it is. I think how one lives our lives is a better antidote.
Because we all know that anti-Semitism and hatred is growing all over the world.
Everywhere, but I don't think any more people, excuse me, give an F about education. Thank you, Judy, for at least.
Judy, come on, don't just shake your head. Get in here.
oh, I still want to interrupt her.
Well, it's better if it goes because, as I said with my comment from Anne before, when you hear somebody else talk, it can spark something also in you. So,
I do think if there was enough good Holocaust education, I don't know if it would get rid of anti-Semitism, but I do think that it does promote standing up for when there is injustice. And I can say from the response from all of the classes that we've done with the Butterfly Project, whether in person or in Zoom.
Judy, can I just say for the benefit of Irene and Carol,
Okay.
Judy is on the board and is an educator for, I don't know if you're still on the board.
No.
Okay, but she's a part of the Butterfly Project and the education team. Jan Landau, who's a co-founder, is normally part of our organization, our movie club here, and she was probably at the TOVA event, so the Federation event. They couldn't be on today. So, so go ahead, Judy. I just want to give you background.
Irene,
go ahead, Irene. What were you going to say?
Sorry, I do know about the Butterfly Project. That's how I joined the second generation, because I'm interested in the Butterfly Project and what you all do there. So
I'm just going to say from that experience, and my mother was a prolific speaker here in San Diego. She went to multitudes of high schools. She took groups to the Museum of Tolerance. And I have letters from her students. And we have letters and comments about our presentations with the Butterfly Project. And I can say that I think, if you can reach out of all those, you reach 5, 10 people, you can make a difference. I don't know about more than that, but that they say, I'll never forget this. I will make a difference and understanding. The other thing is, just interestingly enough, there's a Holocaust group in Phoenix. I used to live in Phoenix for 40 years. And they just did a marvelous project of books that they donated to the prisons on the Holocaust. Because in Arizona, they have a much more active, they've approved Holocaust education in the state government, and it's required in the schools. And anyway, because of that, of course, prisoners get education too. And they got like 650 books that they just delivered to all of the prisons. And I want to say one other thing. Most of you did not know Gussie Sachs. Gussie Sachs also was a survivor, and she spoke also prolific, and she spoke at juvenile detention centers. And she had many students who said to her and wrote to her and said, if you can go through this, I can change my life. I can overcome my obstacles. Now that probably has nothing to do with anti-Semitism, but I am telling you, this kind of education is profound for people in general.
So what do we do when the survivor generation is no longer?
It's coming soon.
Can you tell the same story as Mrs. Sachs?
I can't tell her story, but I can tell my mother's story.
Mhm.
And, Saul can tell his story, and Renee can tell hers, Freddie can tell, we all have a story to tell. And a lot of us think, our story is just, yeah. But you know what? It's, as Saul said, it's a unique story. And as long as you focus, I think, on lessons and not just telling a travelogue, talk about the lessons that, in our parents, the gratitude that our parents had to be Americans and to start a new life, the notion of efficacy, that you rise up, like Renee said, no one's going to beat me. I can do this. There's so many lessons to be learned. And I think that is where we need to really focus as second and third and fourth gen.
Well, I just want to add, my daughter went to the London School of Economics, and she roomed with a German girl, and they had interesting conversations. And based on my daughter, very outspoken, talked to her about the Holocaust, telling her that her grandmother was a survivor of Auschwitz and Bergen-Belsen. And the German girl was fascinated, and she said, do you hold anything against me for what happened to your parents or your grandparents? And my daughter said, no, I don't hold it against you, but I want you to know about it. And I think you should, since you're from the country where, the whole thing began. And I think that, if we impart anything to our kids, they will go on to keep the legacy of our parents somewhat alive. And I think that that's incumbent upon us to do.
I don't think anything will ever get rid of anti-Semitism. I mean, it is so ingrained in the mother's milk of so many people in the world. It's so old. It's so, I think we just have to be strong as Jews and live our culturally, religious, whatever you choose, life, and be proud of that.
So how does this pandemic, which I don't see going away so soon, how do we manage the education? And I think, Judy, it would be great if you could quickly tell this group what you've done at the Butterfly Project, standing in for Jan and your other team. But I think what you've done is so exceptional. So go ahead.
No, I first of all, Yvonne's had her hand up for a while, so I'm going to pass the torch to Yvonne, and then I'll go back if you want me to.
Well, it's okay. You can go, Judy. I can wait.
Well, Jeff, you wanted me to say about the Butterfly Project and what we do, or?
No, the digital part, what you have done over COVID.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Sorry. See, I can't remember anything. we transitioned all of our lessons into Google Slides or Google Docs, whatever they call it. And yeah, so all of our lessons now can be transported around the world, and we're usually on there. And then we have the presentation, and we have Sonia at the end, Sonia Fox-Olbaum. She has her father's uniform. And at the end, we kind of highlight her, and she shares about her dad and how he still had this uniform. And it's been very, listen, it's not as good as being in person. It's so great to see the kids' faces and kind of, the magic that happens in a classroom with the rapport that happens. So it's not, I wouldn't say it's 100%, but it's pretty good. We're really happy with being able to do it. We haven't had many takers. So if you know any schools where people.
Well, I don't know if I'm spilling the beans here, Judy, but you do have a major taker, because in 2022 for Yom HaShoah, Jan and your education committee is going in front of 2,300 people.
Okay, you mean online?
Online through the Jewish Culture and Holocaust Remembrance Group. So you have a.
Doesn't make me nervous, so I'm happy to do it.
All right, and Yvonne, you are next. I'll get you Renee on next one.
Well, I have a couple of things. One is, first of all, I lived in a kibbutz for 6 years in Israel. Back in the 60s, there was a group of Germans who really accepted, like this elderly gentleman did, the guilt. They themselves had been too young to perpetrate it, but their parents or grandparents were perpetrators. And they were looking to come to spend time, 6 months on a kibbutz in Israel, where they could do good for the Jews. And a lot of the kibbutzim had huge discussions. Most of them turned them down. A few decided to take it, and eventually mine did. And this first group came, and they were phenomenal. They couldn't have, from a PR point of view, have presented themselves better. They worked hard. They were always polite, always caring. Perfect. They left, and the next group that wanted to come, we had no problem. We had such a great experience with the first one. Well, it turned out that the German government was now sponsoring teachers to go to Israel. And that was the second group we got. They took it as a free vacation. They didn't come there because they cared about making.
Typical teachers.
Doing something good for the Jews. So the second group was a big failure. They didn't do anything terrible, but you could see that they weren't there to repair anything, tikkun olam. That wasn't their purpose at all. The other thing I wanted to mention is at Beth Israel on, I don't know if it was 10/15, but October 13, we had a presentation that was fascinating. The state of California has a new curriculum about race, so ethnic studies curriculum. So the subject of this Zoom meeting was anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism within the new K-12 ethnic studies curriculum. How did we get here? It is full of anti-Semitism. So the first draft that was done, there were 3 young ladies. One is Tamar, who I happen to know, Tamar Caspi, and I don't offhand know the names of the other 2, but I have them in my, they were phenomenal. These 3 30-somethings who have young children in schools, and it affects their children directly, did a phenomenal amount of research and brought this subject up. And unfortunately, the first draft was sent back. Newsom said that will never see the light of day. A new draft was created, and maybe a third draft even. They were rejected, and the one that was accepted is the first draft, which Newsom said will never see the light of day. And it's up to each school district exactly how they implement it. And this is a tremendous, talking about Holocaust education, this is anti-Holocaust education. This is anti-Semitism, it's anti-Zionism. So whatever good the Holocaust program that Judy and the others are teaching, which I know is good, is being counteracted by this new curriculum. So what they asked of all of us, now most of us don't have children in K through 12 school anymore, but they wanted parents to go to all the board meetings, every board meeting for every district, and force them to address the issue. I can, if anyone's interested, I'm happy to send it to you. I think I have a copy. I think they gave us a copy of the recording.
Judy, you want to respond to that before I go to Renee, or?
Oh, I just want to say, I was like a naysayer on that. I was kind of like, I need to read it. And I did. And one of the things that really, I saw you on Revon. One of the things that really made me think that this is dangerous is the resources that they're asking the teachers to use in training. I was a curriculum director.
Oh, right.
And that scared the you-know-what out of me. And that's when I thought, okay, there's something going on here. So we need to pay attention. I'm sorry, that's all, Jeff.
Yeah, no, I just want to add a comment to that. I forgot to say that. Part of the curriculum requires the teachers to give the other side. Now, what other side is there?
I didn't see anything about the Holocaust. It was primarily about the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, which really is not an American issue. So it's a little weird, but anyway.
Renee?
This goes back also to Judy, because the village where my mother is from is so much involved in educating the youth. Perhaps if you would be willing, I could connect you and the director of that program, maybe some of the slides from the Butterfly Project.
Love to, whatever. That would be beautiful, Renee. Thank you. Yeah.
All right, we're coming close to the end of the, oh, I'm sorry, Irene. Go ahead, Irene.
I have to sign off because I have another Zoom. I apologize, but it was wonderful. I really like meeting everybody, and I would love to get into some more discussions about all of this.
So nice.
Thank you for helping and joining us, and we're blessed with your company, so thank you.
It was wonderful. Nice meeting everybody.
Nice. Bye, Carol.
Bye.
All right, we're at the end of virtually at the end of the program. I'm going to put one more thing in front of you to leave us. We don't really have time to comment on it, but I think it was one of the things that really stood out for me about this movie.
Yeah.
Okay, so I want to let you know about, I need your help for discussing when we will have our November event. We have obviously very busy November, and life is getting busy for everyone. So November is Thanksgiving, and normally we would have the 21st on Sunday would be our week to have the event. Is there interest in having an event that week? There is no other week for us to have the event because other clubs are taking time during those.
When did you say?
21st. It's Sunday, the 21st of November.
Yeah, I could probably do it.
Is anybody else going to weigh in here, or is, I mean, I don't want to have the movie club for 3 people, so
Yeah, it works for me.
Judy?
Yeah, I haven't decided what I'm doing for Thanksgiving, so I don't know if I will be here or not.
Okay.
But yes, now.
All right, so we'll reserve the 21st and we'll see how things go. I'll share with you the movies I'll select for the event shortly. I know you need a lot of time to kind of capture 2 movies. I love doing this with you guys. You're the real stalwarts of the movie club. You come every single month and it's fabulous. So thank you for taking time today. I also want to ask you, is this time better than the 9:30 to 11:30 time slot? Should we just keep the time slot as 1 to 3, or should we move it to 9:30 to 11:30? You can just talk.
Fine. I would never be able to come if it's in the morning.
Okay. All right. Anybody else want to weigh in? So you prefer 1 to 3? Hands up.
I like 9:30.
You like 9:30? Okay.
I think you're probably going to get a difference of opinion from everybody. If you really want to do it democratically, we should vote.
Okay.
All right. So how many for 9:30? Raise your hands.
Well, if it's going to be democratic, why don't you send it to everybody who comes to this?
Because they're not showing up, and I don't know who's really showing up anymore. I'm doing it right now.
Okay.
He's a man of the hour.
9:30. You got 1, 2, 3. Okay, Freddie, you want to say yes or no?
Not 9:30, no.
All right. So why don't we just?
I'm with Freddie. I'd rather the afternoon.
All right. So we'll leave it as it is. It's been working for us for for more than 2 years or a year and a half. So it'll be 1 to 3, 21st. I'll get the movies out to you shortly. I'll try to make them a little lighter than this last group.
Yeah, that last movie was
tough.
very
I understand.
difficult.
I understand. I agree. And I promised that I wouldn't, but I hear you. So thanks a lot, guys. Have a great afternoon. Thanks for your contribution. Ciao.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you. Thank you for being there for us.
Thank you, Jeff.